The project that we are introducing this morning is the release of 1.7 billion documents from the State Department pertaining to the area of 1973 to 1976. This we are making available to the general public in a searchable database, merging these 1.7 million documents with the already released cables in the cable gate projects, 251,000 cables. The documents from 1973 to 1976 are from a very turbulent period in our history. They are casting a light on the U.S. relation, U.S. involvement in many countries, for example, in Latin American dictatorships, so they are of great importance. These documents were all previously classified, but they are now available, but in a very difficult format. It is very hard to search for these documents for academics and journalists, and very hard for the general public. I urge anybody to try to find information there. You have to search in various pockets, and it's very hard to assess them. One form of secrecy is the complexity and the inaccessibility of documents, and it seems to be that the current government is not making a huge effort in making these historical documents accessible. In this way, we are providing a public service. We are doing actually what the government should be doing to make this easily accessible to everybody. Now, there has been also a very serious trend of reversal of declassification, which has been clouded in secrecy as well. In the mid-90s, President Clinton, by an executive order, ordered a declassification of a trove of documents. This was reversed in secret under the Bush administration. It was revealed in 2006 that more than 55,000 documents that had previously been declassified had been reclassified, and this was by the demand of CIA and other agencies. And it was revealed in 2009 that this was an ongoing trend, a very serious one, when the administration tries to hide documents that were previously available. You might be tempted to say that the government cannot be trusted with these documents. So we took the matter in our hands, and we are now making this available in a very accessible database where you can easily search for stories that are of great significance. We are working in this project with 18 media partners that have had some time to assess these documents, and they found stories that they have been publishing, or have published already, or will publish in the next hours or days. They are pertaining to information that are of great interest already today. We can see in these documents that the foreign minister of Sweden, Carl Bildt, Bob Carr, the foreign minister of Australia, had very good relations with the U.S. government at this time, and can be called informants of the U.S. government. Now, before I think it's best that we now connect to London, where Julian Assange is connected via video link. Can you hear us, Julian?
I can hear you, Washington. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you go ahead now?
Thank you for that introduction, Kristen. Orwell once said that he who controls the present controls the past, and he who controls the past controls the future. Our analysis shows that the US administration cannot be trusted with its control of the past. Over the last year, Wikileaks has worked on this project, the public library of US diplomacy, putting together 2 million documents, 1 billion words into a format that is unrivaled. We seem to have lost you, Washington. Hang on a moment.
Can you proceed, Julian?
Are we back? Okay, great.
Go back.
There's some poor quality interception around the embassy, I'm afraid. Orwell famously said that he who controls the present controls the past, and he who controls the past controls the future. And that is because of the vital role that history plays in deciding our interpretation of what is happening in the world. The US National Archives censored all searches to the word Wikileaks. Following that revelation, we looked closely at what else was going on. And in fact, as Kristen said, from 2006, it became apparent that the US National Archive had reverse classification of over 55,000 pages of material. That a great analysis done by the National Security Archives, a group run out of George Washington University. We have pulled together 2 million documents, 250,000 documents from our previous release, Cablegate, 1.7 million documents pulled from the National Archives, and put them together into an integrated format, a search system that we are very proud of. And I would like to thank our technical team and researchers and donors for putting together this really quite impressive piece of work over the past year. Today, our 18 media partners on this project. We seem to have lost you, Washington. Can you confirm?
Yes, you are on now. Okay.
Today, the 18 media partners on this project have started to release some of their stories. Now, that is a result of information, in some cases being hidden by secrecy, but more often being hidden in the borderline between secrecy and complexity. Already today, in India, the ruling party, the Congress party, has been shaken by the revelations that Rajiv Gandhi, part of the Gandhi political dynasty, was involved in what appears to be corrupt Swedish arms deals as a middleman or a broker for family influence within the Indian government. Now, the Congress party has condemned WikiLeaks over that matter, and I say to the Congress party of India that the corruption in the Gandhi political dynasty is well known all over the world, not just as a result of this corrupt Swedish arms deal case, but many other cases. And it's about time that the Congress Party of India took its sandals off before entering the corridors of power. In Australia, as Kristen has said, the Australian Foreign Minister, Bob Carr, who was the former Premier of New South Wales, has been revealed to be a US Embassy informant, not when he was in a position of politics, but when he was in the Australian Union movement. And in fact, that was a priority during the 1970s, and in fact remains a topic of influence within the State Department today, to penetrate unions and co-opt union leaders. In the case of Australia, that includes apparently Bob Carr. In the case of other countries, Latin America, it seems that the stories that we heard from Latin American activists during the 1970s, well, they were more or less true. The way the US tried to corrupt the union movement, the Catholic Church within Latin America. From Spain, the Spanish, well-regarded Spanish journal Publico has found that the King of Spain, King Carlos, conspired with the White House to gain extra influence in Spain, and the United States saw his promotion as an essential element to get NATO to accept Spain, which would help the United States keep their US military bases there. In Brazil, to justify aid to the US military dictatorship, the United States created a torture exemption for Brazil. The Brazilian military had found to be committing acts of torture. The United States Congress had put in place a system to prevent aid to torturous dictatorships, but nonetheless, by massaging an exemption loophole, $66 million in credits for purchases of weapons by the military in Brazil was enabled. Of course, if we look at those credit purchasing schemes, it's not about Brazil. It's not about the countries that are buying weapons. Of course, what it's about is tax transfer within the United States from one sector to another sector, namely the sector of people who pay tax, essentially the middle class, to very influential military contractors like Northrop Grumman, Boeing, Raytheon, General Dynamics, etc. In Italy, our partner Espresso and La Repubblica has revealed that just 5 weeks after the coup of Pinochet against the Allende government in Chile, the Vatican was telling the State Department that it had grave concern, and the Pope had concern about the way that the international left was describing the coup. So the Vatican was advising the US on how to massage the Allende coup in Chile. Huffington Post Italy out this morning with a diplomatic communication involving a secret agreement between the Communion and Liberation Front over the Communist Party, both parties, and the individual concerned, Luigi Giussani, of relevance today in Italian politics. In Greece, our Greek partner Tania has done great work, have material out nearly every day this week.
Referring to the story that you were talking about, the highlights of Julian, are you back on?
Yeah, I am. I have been apparently preaching to the ether for a few minutes.
Only for about a minute and a half, I think. So you were talking about the Pope in the Vatican.
Yes, our Italian partner, the best regarded news magazine, a bit like Der Spiegel in Germany, Espresso, and its sister newspaper, La Repubblica, out today with a description of how the Pope and the Vatican were advising the United States on how to massage public perceptions about the coup against Salvador Allende in Chile. From Greece, at the time under the Greek dictatorship, the regime of the colonels, Greek partner has material coming out nearly every day this week on what had happened then. A lot of material about the really tense relationship between Greece and Turkey. That partner is Tanea, T-A-N-E-A. And involving the it's quite a quite a complex issue involving NATO and US military aid surrounding the Turkish state oil company. From Egypt, and our Egyptian partner Al-Masri Al-Yum, this is quite topical and interesting now, that in 1975 the US State Department revealed the use of the Muslim Brotherhood and Islamists in the university to break strikes and leftist forces there. So that's quite interesting to see that the Muslim Brotherhood being used as an intermediary device. You normally think of them as an opposition, and constrain the left in Egypt, which is something we wouldn't see as a concern today, but it's something that the US State Department was doing all across the world in the 1970s, which was betting on horses which might look unacceptable, which would nonetheless marginalize leftist movements or independence movements in various countries. And there's many more coming out all the time. Now, I'll just, if the connection is still valid, can you hear me, Washington?
Yes. You are on, yep.
So I'll just go very briefly through, if you like, the highlights of the interface. It's sometimes quite hard for journalists and people who work with words to understand the scale of things, because it's something that requires a sense of numeracy. It's why, for example, you see so often newspaper articles confusing 1 billion, 1 million, and 1 trillion, even though we would assume that we would never confuse $1 and $1,000, but that's the degree of scale. But when we can visualize things, we can get a feeling for the scale of what we're looking at. And this material that we've published today is the single most significant geopolitical publication that has ever existed. So here is our world map, and you can have a look at this by going to wikileaks.org/+D map. The color code here is a frequency of reference. Now, you can select particular time periods to see the frequency of country references across that time period. Now, as it's not surprising that the Soviet Union is of significant interest, but what is perhaps a little more interesting is to understand the unexpected. So, as an Australian, I know, of course, of the Western and US involvements in Indonesia, but it's perhaps not so widely understood in the United States. You can see that Indonesia here, with more than 140,000 occurrences, is very similar to Egypt. Of course, Egypt is of such interest because partly its strategic significance in the Middle East, but also this is the time of the Yom Kippur War and several other confrontations involving Egypt and Syria. If we look at the Soviet Union and compare this approximately 250,000 references to France with 372,000, and the United Kingdom with 376,000, we see something similar to what we saw today, what we see today with North Korea. That is, that there's a desire to hype up for public relations reasons, the threat of a country. Now, North Korea, these last few weeks, has been chosen to be that threat. And in academic circles, that's known as securitization, where you take some phenomena and you hype it up to instill fear in the community, and you securitize the phenomenon, and that results in increased tax transfer to the military-industrial complex as opposed to the hospital system or the social security system or even diplomacy. So we see, actually, everyone thinks about the Cold War and this what is perceived to be a titanic struggle between the United States and the Soviet Union. But we can see, in fact, that the interests of the State Department, as expressed by the content of over 1 billion words in its diplomatic cables, is essentially checking the activities, interacting with the activities of other empires. And so, yes, the Soviet Union was an attempted empire, but if you look at the true interest, it is of lesser significance during the period 1973 to 1976 than France, and importantly than the United Kingdom. And that makes sense if we understand the securitization process that we see in relationship, say, to the Soviet Union. Now we can zoom in on some of these regions. And here, for example, is intensity of interest, not measured by subject, but measured by the actual content of this material in Latin America. And we can see for this particular time period here, which is just the beginning months of 1973, but it can be adjusted. There's Ecuador, for example, with 1,202 references. The size of these objects is proportionate to the number of references. Similarly, interests surrounding my home country, Australia. Here we can see something really quite remarkable occurring in Southeast Asia. Of course, we have all heard about the Vietnam War, but the significance of Thailand, for example, not well understood by the majority of people in historical context. Similarly, the relative poverty of reporting on Beijing and China during this period. But I suppose most significant is this intense interest in what is happening in Indonesia. And Australians and people familiar with this region will remember, of course, what happened in East Timor during this period with the Indonesian invasion. Another way to feel the scale of this material, you can very quickly do a time graph for the entire period for any particular phenomena. So here is, for example, Egypt versus Israel. I'll see if we can add Syria. There we go. So we see here the Yom Kippur War. You'll notice the incidence of spikes coming up all together, reflecting this war. But you also notice the relative intensity of these nations across this period. That yes, Israel is very significant. If we look at some average period, about 2.28% of cables, but Egypt just under this, really very strategically significant place for the United States. And if we take the days and hours surrounding the beginning of the Yom Kippur War, we can see in the material hourly reporting of what was happening with the reports from the US Embassy in Cairo saying, well, nothing much happening here, to promises by the Israelis on what their intentions were, and then of course reporting on the aftermath and the ceasefire. Here's something central to US history, the coincidence between Nixon and Watergate. We can see these spikes here and another one occurring at the time of the impeachment and resignation. Now, where are we? As some of you may be aware, Margaret Thatcher died last night, and of course there are a great many cables about her, some 400 and something, which you can find just by searching for Margaret Thatcher. But here is one that we put out last night ourselves, unaware of what the news would be this morning. Margaret Thatcher, some first impressions, and we see here, unfortunately for her prospects of becoming a national as opposed to distinct from a party leader, she has over the years acquired a distinctively upper middle class personal image. Her immaculate grooming, her imperious manner, her conventional and somewhat forced charm, and above all her plummy voice, stamp her as the quintessential suburban matron, and frighteningly English to boot. None of this goes down well with the working class of England, 1/3 of which used to vote Conservative, to say nothing of all classes in the Celtic fringes of this island. That's an example of what happens when you have 2 million documents about geopolitical circumstances all over the world. It's like a source you can interview again and again on nearly any subject that comes up. In this case, what's come up is the death of Margaret Thatcher, and no doubt her involvement in the Falkland Islands and so on. Here's a great example from Kissinger himself. There are over 200,000 individual documents referencing Henry Kissinger. This is a meeting between Henry Kissinger and the Turkish foreign minister in 1975, looking at the arms embargo that was placed around Turkey concerning its conflict with what's that country? Concerning its conflict with Greece and Cyprus. We see here that there's an attempt to the Turks are concerned about the embargo and they want US weapons parts to come into Turkey, and there's a suggestion that it be sent, and the Turks say, well, that is illegal. Kissinger response is a joke, but it's not really a joke, and a fantastic quote. The illegal we do immediately, the unconstitutional takes a little longer. And we'll make a major effort in order to somehow get around the arms embargo. Topical today, of course, because of the renewed conflict with Cyprus. Now, this is an interesting example from Sweden, involving the Swedish Foreign Minister Carl Bildt, who has been a bane to this organization, and Karl Rove. So when we first did the analysis of this material, just the first introductory analysis, I did so with a friend who's a Swedish journalist, and we thought, well, let's just pick a random country something that we both know something about. So let's pick Sweden. And we started going through these Swedish cables, and we saw this name, Carl Bildt. And he's the current foreign minister and the former prime minister of Sweden. And we thought to ourselves, well, this must be the uncle or the father or something, because this cable is from 1975. It can't be the same guy that's causing us problems now, surely. But it turns out, in fact, it is the same Carl Bildt. The same Swedish foreign minister was inducted into the what the State Department calls the International Visitors Program, given 100,000 Swedish kroners, put in contact with a wide variety of Washington institutions, given his travel details, given to the Central Intelligence Agency, and he passed on extensive political intelligence, which has become a major scandal in Sweden as a result of this release, about inside secret negotiations on the Swedish nuclear policy and whether Sweden would form a government or not. This is a good example of how to use this material journalistically. So we have some raw ingredients here. Carl Bildt going into the United States, becoming a informant to the US Embassy. Once he's over in Washington, developing a personal relationship with Karl Rove. But then we've managed to acquire other documents, and we'll place some of these up later on tonight. And our Swedish partners, Aftonbladet, tracked down Carl Bildt's handler at the US Embassy, who disclosed informant he was. Similarly, Carl Bildt and Bob Carr, the Australian Foreign Minister, were together in Australia on national TV, in fact, talking about our organisation together with the United States ambassador to Australia. And so when you can see this pattern of how people ended up becoming involved in the United States, you can see that they see their patronage network and their networks of influences intimately involved in currying favour with the US State Department. That IV program is perhaps one of the most significant global stories to come out of this material. It is a global story because there are over 1,000 references to IV grantee, and many of those individuals have subsequently gone on to extremely powerful places. Margaret Thatcher, for instance, is detailed as one of these IV grantees who was taken into the United States, and a number of other figures that are themselves either now in power or they are part of political dynasties. And you can search this, the 2 million, 1 billion words through a wide variety of mechanisms. So we've collated all the senders, recipients, internal bureaus within the State Department. It's a search system that I'm quite proud of. One of our people said recently that that this is what Google should be like. That this is a real search system. This is a search system that investigative journalists can use effectively. Our Spanish partner, Publico, said this morning that investigative journalism was never so effective. Kristen?
Thank you, Julian. And maybe just before we go over to Q&A, I just want to briefly mention the banking blockade that is still in force against us. Just to remind you that in December 2010, shortly after we started releasing the embassy cables in the Cablegate project, in a matter of 48 hours, the Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, Bank of America, and Western Union imposed a blockade on us. So ever since, it has not been possible for individuals to donate to us directly. This is still in force. This is unprecedented. Such an attack on an organization that is basically providing information, a journalistic organization. We are fighting this by legal means, and the next milestone in that fight will be a Supreme Court hearing on April 19th, where